Mayani has always been built on a very strong vision of empowering smallholder farmers across the Philippines. In our country, with about 7,000 islands, we have about 10 million smallholder farmers here. And I think the irony of, despite having a lot of them here, feeding an entire nation of 100 million peoples with different dialects, right, is that they actually fall deeper and deeper into poverty, especially when COVID happened. So we're coming from a very strong mission case less than 24 months ago, and I don't think that mission case faltered in any way. So while we may have started first with a vision and a social impact DNA, we built the technology around it and actually said, you know what, maybe technology can be a force for good. Maybe we can harness the power of tech, power of platforms to help connect a lot of these smallholder farmers to consumers, right? Because the core problem for a Filipino farmer is, if I harvest today after tilling the land 3 months ago, who's gonna buy? And if it's gonna be bought, is it gonna be bought fairly, right? So that's where we're coming from. So we built an ag e-commerce platform, and that's what MAYANI'S is all about. We're sourcing fresh produce directly from farmers. We consolidate their harvest at scale. We take out all the middlemen, which has always been traditionally the problem of smallholder value chains. And then we digitize that supply chain end to end. So that's where we are right now. We've been super grateful for the kind of support that we've been getting from, the likes of ADB, for instance, who has supported us ever since, as well as global VCs and a coalition of investors that we have. To date, we are now partnered with the Philippine Department of Trade, the Republic's trade promotion arm. We're in as its farm-to-table platform partner. We work across 3 regions. The Philippines has over 12 regions across the country. We work with Region 1, that's Northern Philippines. We work with Cagayan Valley region, considered as one of the food baskets of the entire Luzon. And third, the Cordillera Administrative Region, which covers our upland and indigenous farmers where the likes of broccoli and cauliflower would grow. As a partner of government now, we're providing that continuity in the agricultural supply chain, even amidst the ongoing lockdown. When urban centers need access to fresh, affordable, fresh produce like fruits and vegetables, and at the same time, the farmers actually rely on us for the continuity of their incomes and livelihood. That's one. Number 2, even as a young startup in less than 2 years, we already power some of the biggest commercial supply chains in the country for fresh. The likes of Shell, the likes of retail giant Walter Mart and Robinson's Group, even global foundations like Rotaract. Now we're even partnered with Save the Children in their fight against hunger. So we're proud to share that we have generated massive traction already, and we're now ahead of the curve in the Philippine agricultural supply chain. Right now, also in terms of farmers' footprint, we work now with over 30,000 smallholder farmers across the country. And in a country wherein you got about 10 million, I can tell you we're barely 1% done. And that is what excites us every day, to at least be able to drive that number, hopefully, to 10 million. Empowering rural Southeast Asia. There are over 100 million smallholder farmers in Southeast Asia, and majority of the food on their table actually hails from smallholder value chains. We want to be able to be that leading smallholder tech platform that is empowering over 100 million smallholder farmers in rural Southeast Asia. Our thesis is Southeast Asia is beautiful, but at the same time, Southeast Asia is fraught with a lot of challenges, especially in the agriculture sector. I think it's imperative for people who eat every day to actually recognize where it's coming from and actually innovate for that particular sector. We think agriculture is an industry worth innovating for. One, stakeholders, right? The very nuance of our business is, and the requisite of our business model in terms of supply chain and the operations, part of that model is we work with farmers, right? That in itself prompts us and primes already the entire company for impact, right? Because we deal with organized smallholder farmers. The second thing in terms of measurable expressions of impact, right, that we're making as a byproduct of our traction, because we're increasing farm gate prices. By taking out all the middlemen, we also decrease the price on the part of consumer. On the part of farmers, higher farm gate prices would mean higher incomes. And so we've always had this impact metric called the attributable rise in farmers' income, which is now averaging 50%. 50% for a country we're in, a lot of the people and the farmers are actually doing low, I would say the low value crops like coconut, corn, and rice. A 50% jump can actually spell the difference whether their kids are going to go to school or not, right? The second thing that we would say would be, in terms of impact, would be reduction in food loss. Global average, according to the World Bank, right, and a lot of the studies would be 30% of the food that gets harvested gets wasted before it even goes to the consumer. And I think COVID has underscored the fact, even in Singapore, for instance, right, we're in food security is the core imperative of any government. That's why Singapore has Singapore 30 by 30 by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. In the Philippines, for an emerging country such as ours, right, we got 100 million souls to feed. That is all the more an imperative. And we can't afford to have such a huge food loss between the farmer and the consumer, because in the Philippines, it can go as high as about 57%, right? According to one study I saw. So in our case, we've reduced that to just about 15%. And while it is still there, we feel that's a good start. Maybe we could keep it down to a more manageable level. And that is our contribution to reducing food loss, because farming is a huge contributor for carbon, right? Even from a climate standpoint, right? The more food that you waste, the more that you waste those carbons and the fuel and all the efforts that came with coming up with that single grain of rice, for instance, or that single cob of corn, right? So for us, it's kind of like a very clear expression of impact. I think the want is more of a collective want to make a dent and a difference, right? I think a lot of organizations today, especially the ones that are built to last and built to survive, and organizations that can outlive the founders themselves, have always been grounded in a very strong sense of purpose. So it wasn't just me who started Mayani, it was actually the collective. So there's 7 of us in the founding team, and everybody had this single, unified and mobilizing vision of changing the way food arrives at our table through technology, right? And we just got frustrated with status quo we're in. How come this has long been a problem? Food is actually quintessential and perhaps the most natural thing to a human being. It has the largest consumer base in the entire planet compared to other verticals. And yet the way the food arrives at our table is perhaps the most sophisticated, convoluted process we've ever seen. And so when we did that, that was kind of like our battle cry. And then we built Mayani. I think 3 things. 1, we're very gritty people. I think the thing with hailing from an archipelago nation that has always been seen as an emerging nation, since time immemorial, is that you go through a lot of hardships in this country, right? And you get exposed to the reality on the ground at the grassroots that this is what's really happening. And therefore, we're the kind of people and we're the kind of team, and we have that DNA, we just don't give up very easily, right? We stick to our vision. We can be flexible with how we get to that vision, the execution, but we just don't ever give up on that vision, right? So I think that's very important, because this startup journey is actually kind of like Fight Club, right? You can't just give up. And we need people who don't give up, especially for their big why. I think the second one would be, we have concrete experience, right? We recognize that the reality of starting a startup, sometimes passion wouldn't cut it. Passion alone isn't enough, right? And good isn't good enough. So for us, if you couple it with on the ground, boots on the ground, road tested experience, right? If you take a look at our founding team, my co-founder Ochi, he's been a farmer for three decades, right? In natural and organic farming, former farm school director for an entire province. He is a farmer. So when we talk about agritech, we do have the domain expertise to actually tackle this, because we have a guy who's been there, right? Jeff, for instance, our founder executive chair, has experience in scaling companies in Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, meaning that he actually draws from a very strong actual background of expanding beyond the home country, which is what every startup, should have, a borderless vision, right? And myself, working as a tech executive for formerly the #1 e-com logistics app in the country, growing e-com volume growth for the likes of Carousel, the Ant Financial backed Gcash, Nestle, 7-Eleven, and clients like that. So overall, we do have the experience, over 100 years of combined experience, because if passion just alone wouldn't cut it, we do have the experience to make it happen. I think the third one is the clarity when it comes to the impact that we're making. I think it's very clear for founders now, especially in the time of ESG investing, right? We're in companies now think beyond profits. And in our case, we've clearly articulated measurable expressions of impact as a byproduct of our commercial traction. And for us, that is very powerful as a story, because while other startups stop on the commercial traction, we even take it further, push the envelope further, and extrapolate from there. How are we making a difference in the lives of people? Because we have these fantastic numbers, right? So I think that social impact DNA is very strong. I found out about AA because of Albert Go. So Albert is a friend of mine. He's also Filipino, and he built a strong startup we've been partnered with ever since MAYANI'S started, called Beam and Go. In our conversation, when both our startups got chosen by the Philippine Department of Trade to represent the country at the RISE conference in Hong Kong in 2019, Albert told me that he highly recommends AA, that you guys have actually served as a launch pad for them to grow as a company. And look at where they are right now. Now they're delving into fintech, developing an e-wallet for global Filipinos. So after that one, I've always had a strong impression of AA as a catalyst for early stage startups to maximize their peak performance and peak potential, right? Because that's what I saw firsthand with Albert's startup. And so afterwards, he recommended that I apply to the program, for MAYANI to apply to the program. And that's it. Now we're here. I think pitch night, for me, that is where the rubber hits the road. To be able to pitch to actual investors, VCs, share your story, share a compelling startup growth trajectory, and be able to articulate your value proposition, business model very well to an audience who otherwise is a stranger to you, right? That for me is very important, and the feedback I got is very valuable. I think the second one would be Growth Jam. I think dealing with founders and founders helping founders has always been a very effective scheme, because it is a lonely journey up here. It's a lonely journey moving forward. But I guess what makes it less lonely is actually having people along the way who tells you, what, the battle scars you've experienced and the problems and the challenges you're fraught with, we've encountered that, and this is how we solved it. So, taking that guy right beside you and just holding on to each other and, exchanging lessons, founders helping founders, very important.